Welcome, everyone. My name is Akela Peoples. I'm CEO of Mental Health Research Canada, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you today to Stories of Hope, a young person's journey from addiction and crisis to recovery. We have run some lived experience workshops and webinars in the past with tremendous feedback from our audiences. So we're very pleased to have you join us today and hear directly from people who have mental health stories to share. Today we're going to be joined by a young woman called Lindsay, who's going to share her story, and also Susan Raphael, who's a clinician and an author of a book called What's Wrong with My Teen, someone that has had decades of experience supporting young people and their families through addictions. Mental Health Research Canada is a national organization, and while my colleagues are in different parts of the country, I'm leading the conversation today from the Toronto area on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and we are most grateful for the use of this land. Our agenda today includes some housekeeping items in a moment that I will be sharing, and then we will be having a fireside chat. And also we encourage you to ask many questions throughout this session through the chat function. Mental Health Research Canada is a national organization. If you're not familiar with us, I encourage you to visit our website. Our mission is to improve mental health in Canada through data, evidence, and stakeholder engagement. We have a lot of information on our website, and we're best known for tracking the mental health of Canadians and rapid reporting on that quarterly, turning out easy to understand, easy to read reports that put data in the hands of decision makers and Canadians so that there's up-to-date information about what's happening with Canadians' mental health. In terms of some housekeeping items for today's agenda, just wanted to have a content warning. Often we deal with sensitive topics on these webinars, so underscoring that for anyone in the audience that may be concerned. Our 45-minute session today is being recorded, and the full recording will be available following this webinar on our website, along with many other webinars that have been recorded in the past. And I encourage you, if you're interested in this webinar today, to spend some time on our website and look at recordings from past webinars. As I mentioned, we encourage questions. Please submit those through the chat function. And as always, we very much appreciate feedback to ensure that the events that we're providing are useful for you as an audience. A lot of work goes into planning events like this, and we want to make sure that we receive feedback and make every event better than the last. And I'd like to provide a shout out to my colleague, Brittany Saab, who's our Senior Manager of Communications, and she'll be facilitating the questions today, but she's responsible for most of the work behind today's webinar. So thank you, Brittany. I know you'll be joining us shortly. So without further ado, I'm very excited to be introducing our two guests today, and I'm going to have them each introduce themselves. And after that, I'll have a conversation with Lindsay, who's going to share her story. So first, I'd like to do a brief introduction of Lindsay and turn over and invite her to share any information about herself before introducing Susan. So Lindsay's a young woman who holds both college and university degrees, and she's currently living and traveling independently. She is entrepreneurial and creative, and I know she's going to be very excited to share a little bit about herself beyond what it says on this slide. So Lindsay, if you would like to join us on camera, maybe you could tell our audience just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, hi, everyone. My name's Lindsay. I'm here today to share my experiences with mental health and addiction from someone who's personally experienced it and also has family members struggling with the same thing. So I hope that my story offers hope to anyone listening today, as my journey shows that addiction isn't linear, but sort of a wave of a lifelong journey. And with the right tools and support, you can also still live a healthy and meaningful life. My life today looks a lot better than obviously it was 10, 15 years ago when I first entered, when I first started seeing Susan and getting the help I needed. So yeah,
Right.
everything's great for me. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
And
for having me.
I'd like to thank you for having the courage to share your story. We've always believed that if even one person listening is inspired or is helped by what you share today, that it's worth everyone's time and effort. So I really want to thank you. It takes a lot of courage to
Thank
very
you. I appreciate
authentically share your story. So thank you. And you can stay on camera while I
that.
introduce Susan briefly.
Sure.
Susan, if you'd like to join us on camera. Delighted to have Susan Raphael with us today as well. Susan is an addiction and mental health clinician. I'm going to ask her to tell us a little bit about herself in a moment. I've already mentioned that she's the author of What's Wrong with My Teen, Finding Answers to Teenage Addiction and Family Crisis. And she brings decades of experience to this conversation today and is going to provide some context after we have a chat with Lindsay. Welcome, Susan, and perhaps you'd like to share a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, Akela. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for having this conversation with Mental Health Research Canada. I feel it's a very important one, and I'm very happy to have Lindsay here sharing her perspective and her journey and just being able to participate in something that raises the level of awareness around young people, the family involvement in addiction and mental health challenges and recovery. And it's a unique perspective. So I'm really excited to be participating in this.
Thank you, Susan. And there's a picture of your book. If anyone is interested in this topic, recommend it as a great read. This comes from, as I mentioned, years of experience of Susan supporting many families through many crises. So thank you for putting this book together. I'm sure it's already helped many, many families, and hopefully the audience might have an interest in picking up your book.
Thank you.
So I don't think it's any secret. You've already both alluded to it, but Susan, you've been actually working with Lindsay through her journey. So I just wanted to put context around that. So at this point, I'm going to first go to Lindsay, and I'm going to invite you, Lindsay, to share a little bit about your journey. Tell us what happened and how things evolved for you in your life. I believe you're 28
Mhm.
now, and this journey for you started when you were about 14, I think. So maybe I'll just turn over to you so in your own words you can take us through the journey that you've had. And thank you again
Totally.
for sharing it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So yeah, when I was about 13, 14, I guess like any other, I mean, not every teenager, but like, as someone growing up in adolescence, substance use was always sort of like something around when I was in school. So just like my friends, I started drinking and smoking weed and doing all whatever my friends were doing. And I got caught a few too many times. And for me and my family, I have an older sister who previously had like really suffered with mental health and addiction. She was in rehab and my parents sent her to therapy and it never really clicked for her. She's actually still actively struggling with it, but I think my parents at that time wanted to sort of nip it in the bud and not have me turn out like her. So they sent me to Susan, who I at first was really hesitant about because I was like, I don't think I have a problem. I think I just, I'm a teenager. My friends are doing it. My sisters are doing it. So why not? I'm not an addict. But I actually really resonated with a lot of what Susan had to say and help me with. And through Susan, I was also going to like peer support groups and AA meetings and stuff. And there was a lot of relatability with having people my age in that program who were going through similar things of being a young teenager. And, I felt like some of the meetings also felt not unrelatable, but I feel like in meetings you hear a lot from older people sharing stories about their like lifelong battles and how they ruined their families and this and that. And I was just like, I'm just 14. Like, I don't really have this like experience under me but being surrounded by people my age going through similar things really sort of helped me put like a good head on my shoulders. And I, got a sponsor and like did the steps and kind of went in and out of the program later as well. But later in life also kind of circled back with like having those tools that really helped sort of like keep me in check. As much as I like at the time didn't think I had many issues, I feel like it sort of resurfaced later in my life as well. That having those tools when I was younger really kept me in check. And I still, you know, I still struggle with mental health and substance use, but I have those tools now and I'm a lot better than I was even like 2 years ago with like staying away from things that aren't good for me. and and just surrounding yourself with good people and having good support. So yeah, that's kind of my story going into getting better. So yeah.
So, Lindsay, if you can remember back to when you were 14 and as you described, experimenting with
Mm-hmm.
alcohol and cannabis, but then I understand as you went through the next few years, you
Yeah.
experimented with some harder drugs. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that early journey from
Yeah,
being,
for sure.
a young person just experimenting with things to it evolving into an addiction that
Yeah.
you really needed some tools and help, as you've mentioned, to
Yeah,
master and to overcome?
for sure. So yeah, at the beginning it was just weed and alcohol, and then sort of didn't really identify with like having serious issues with it. But then later years, in my like late teens, early 20s, I started using cocaine, which I found out pretty quickly that I kind of didn't have control over. I was using it pretty frequently, very frequently. Um, and I noticed really quickly that like, yeah, normal people don't just like do drugs like this every day. So I think I have a problem. I know I have a problem. I can admit to that. Um, and yeah, I think having these experiences definitely helped me notice the signs pretty early on, and having Susan to share these things with and help me through these times. But then even, got clean from that at 19, 20. And then years later thought, hey, it's been a while. I don't, I feel like I'm on a pretty good track. You dabble again, and then, things go badly. And then you come back and you realize, okay, no, this is like actually something I need to completely stay away from. So that's why it's, you know, been a journey. And with that too, like it's not just substances either. Like I think one of these things we forget to realize about addiction is you give up one thing and you start using another thing to cope, whether it be substances or food or relationships, any kind of dopamine is what an addict kind of draws to. So you need to realize we need to realize too that just like at the end of the day, it doesn't really have to do with the substances, but how we choose to cope with life, and noticing these patterns when we start abusing other things that may seem healthy, but we're using them for the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just every day is like, yeah, a battle, but we remember. Yeah.
What impact on your life did it have? You mentioned you had an older sibling who still today
Hmm.
struggles. What impact did that have on you as you were a very young girl?
Hmm.
And how did
I
that
think,
interplay into everything?
yeah. So, I my only memories of her are when she was using, because she's about 7 years older than me, and she started using at the same time I did. So I was like 6 or 7. Um, and obviously that was horrible to experience as a young child. She put my whole family through a lot, but I think that was really obviously hard to watch growing up. And then having her as sort of an example made me think like, oh, well, I am not going to do it how she did, but like obviously I still want to experiment and do these things and live my life, but not in the way that she was doing. She was just like a bulldozer, just ruining every relationship she had, losing trust from everyone around her. I was a little more sneaky about it. I'd say I definitely learned from her mistakes, but we're still the same chip off the old block. So I unfortunately share the same DNA. And I feel like I definitely also have that addictive gene as well. And for a long time, I was like almost blaming her or kind of pointing fingers and not really looking internally. Like, I think I only had this sort of epiphany a few years ago of like, how can I be upset at her for using drugs when I'm doing the exact same thing? Like, how does that make me any different than her, you know?
Mhm.
And then I had that epiphany one day and I was just like, I can't do this at all ever anymore. Like, this is very hypocritical. And just like, I need to be that example for her or anyone else in my family who might be struggling with the same thing or my peers around me. Like, I can't sort of point fingers and just do the exact same things that she does. So that gave me a lot of sympathy for her reality and maybe a bit more compassionate towards her and not as resentful because I resented her my whole life. But now I can sort of come of a place of loving and understanding that we're the same person, you know?
A few minutes ago, you said the words, yes, I have a problem. How old do you think you were when you realized that? Because 14, 15, that's very young.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I know you said when you first met Susan and got help that you didn't think you had a problem. You were just a
Totally.
normal teenager experimenting with things, in your words. So when do you
Yeah.
think that I had a problem? When did that take root with you?
I think my subconscious picked it up when I was 18, maybe, yeah, 18. But I think I was actually like comfortably able to like say it out loud maybe 2 years ago. You know what I mean? I feel like there was a bit of not denial, but just kind of like, it's not that serious, it's not that bad, but like you always know, you're as what's the quote? You're only as sick as your deepest secrets. So
Mm.
I think I knew back then, but I was like finally able to like say it out loud and admit it like a couple years ago.
And for you, do you think that's a big part of the journey to recovery is actually admitting to yourself, I
100%.
do have a
Yeah.
problem?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's also, what is that? The first, yeah, that's the first step, right? In the 12 steps. So it's good that it's the first one because you need to admit to it before you start putting in the work. But I think I think admitting it is pretty powerful and like surrendering, to your
Mhm.
shortcomings is yeah, it's what you got to
And
do.
so from where you sit now, looking back on this journey and looking ahead in your life, do you think that addiction in some way, shape, or form is always going to be something that you're going to have to wrestle with and keep
Yeah.
control of? Or do you think someday you'll wake up and addiction won't be an issue in your life? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's something that stays. If you have a addictive personality or addictive disorder, or whatever, I think it's definitely something that stays forever. Like you are you are who you are. What am I trying to say? Um, who you are is how you cope with your shortcomings or any battle that comes at you from life. So, we're I think every day is just like another test and another opportunity to
Hmm.
try to do better. But I definitely think that it's something you struggle with every day. I don't do drugs like that anymore. I don't smoke, but sometimes I find myself like getting addicted to like candy or affirmations from others or relationships and things like that. Like things always sort of pop up once in a while, and I'm always just like, no, stop. Like you're using something as some like what's really going on? Why do you feel that you need to like do these things? Why do you gravitate towards, you know, different types of like dopamine? I think it's something that you just constantly have to deal with.
And do you have the answer to the question that you just posed there, or is that something that you need to search for as you go through life? You said, why do you always need to use
Mm,
something to make yourself feel better? Do you have the
I
answer to
think
that?
I think it differs for everyone, but I think for me, it's just some sort of escapism. I think we avoid problems by searching for something that feels good. But if we tackle our problems, that rids the need for like searching elsewhere, you know?
Hmm.
But I I'm still figuring it out too.
Yes, a lifelong journey in figuring it out, I'm sure. I'm going to break
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
second and just see if Brittany has any questions. I see there's quite a few questions popping up. So before I bring Susan into the conversation, I'll see, Brittany, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask. This is our colleague Brittany at Mental Health Research
So,
Canada.
yes, there are. And Lindsay, thank you so much for that. I just want to pop in first and say I really appreciated the line where you said, who you are is how you cope with the challenges that you face. I thought that was so insightful.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple questions from our audience today. We also had a good amount of questions sent in over the last couple of weeks to our email. So I'll start with just a quick one from our audience, and then I think I'll pivot. So the question is, I know you mentioned that you started meeting with Susan when you were in 14 years old. Was
Mhm.
Susan the first support that was sought out for you, or did you have a hard time finding the right counselor? And if that's the case, what particularly was a mismatch for you? And expanding on that, how do you find the right person to ask for help?
Very good question. So Susan actually saw my sister when my sister was the same age. I don't know how my parents found her, but I know that she was the first person they thought of because she obviously knew my background and knew my sister. So, and then we just got along swimmingly. Um, so I was really blessed in that sense. I know I do have a lot of friends who have a bit of trouble finding the right help and someone that they feel comfortable around to tell their problems to. So I think either the best would be recommendation from friends if you have friends who are getting help. If not, I think just reaching out to someone and finding someone that just works for you. Because I think, you do have to obviously feel comfortable with who you want to let in. But
And
yeah,
we're gonna pop up some resources from Susan at the end
exactly.
of
Yeah,
the call.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one more
I
question,
do,
Brittany?
I do, yeah, I do have one more that I'd like to take from our email before we move on, and this one's also for Lindsay. And that is, if you could go back and speak to your younger self during the most difficult moments, what would you want her to understand about what was ahead for her?
Oh my God, that's such a good question that makes me want to cry. Just oh my gosh, what would I tell my younger self at that time? Probably that no matter what, life can always get better than it is today. Just stay hopeful and keep putting in the work, but also just, you know, the people around you do love you and they do want the best for you. I think at the time it felt very targeted and very out of, I don't know, not out of spite, but almost like I was in trouble or, that I was, doing something really bad. But I think sometimes these things that people wish for you, like your parents say, if your parents are the ones saying that you should get help, for example, they just love and care about you so much. So listen to the people that are worried about you because it's not out of spite, it's out of love. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think we'll bring you back in a short while, Brittany, with some more questions. But I think we'll bring Susan into the conversation at this time with your so many years of experience helping young people like Lindsay and their families. Obviously, addiction, especially with a young person, affects a whole family, not just the
Yeah.
individual. So, Susan, just wondering sort of what your thoughts are. I know that you've obviously known Lindsay for a long time, but any kind of context you would like to put around her story?
Well, thank you for sharing. I think you encapsulated it really well, Lindsay, and so honest and open. Um, yes, it's not such a given that the addiction disorders and mental health disorders are a family affliction. Often there is a sense I had earlier when I was working at this outpatient practice recovery counseling services in Toronto, where Lindsay's family knew to come. Um, and her parents were getting support as well through seeing a parent counselor, someone separate from me, and also attending a parent group with other peer supports. But it's difficult for parents to understand that it's a family process often. And there is a sense of I want to drop my young person off at the door and you're going to fix them. And if you don't fix them, it's your, you have the issue and it's nothing to do with me. I'm going to pay for it. And that's kind of that's a very cut and dry perspective, but it's a process to educate the family that they too are a system. We often hear about mental health systems and there aren't enough services and the structure. And the family itself is a system. So if we can start there, uh, maybe there's some hope in jutting out from that. So the family is a system that's impacted. Everyone is affected by another's unwellness or symptoms or behaviors. And there's different roles that family members play. And there's quite a universality to addiction and mental health. There's a certain amount of denial, there's a certain amount of blame, there tends to be rationalization, minimization, or maybe some exaggeration or dramatization of what's happening. So there's lots of different roles that get played. So again, education and awareness can play a really key role in just understanding what's happening to the whole system. Uh, and then looking at the individual's symptoms and behaviors and who is kind of the identified patient. And as Lindsay has shared, she was the second sort of identified patient in the family. So there was already a pattern and a narrative around mental health and addiction. So, and I really want to applaud you and your family for being willing to seek help and being willing to be part of a solution and a framework of understanding and accountability where they could learn. So she did have the luxury kind of that. And quite frankly, if there wasn't a fit with me, there were other clinicians at this practice who she could have gone to see, and she did interact with other clinicians too, as families do. So sometimes people would bounce around. They'd see me for a while, then they'd go and see somebody else. So that's the nice thing about being in kind of a system of care.
Mm-hmm. Lindsay, if I ask you anything you're not comfortable answering, by all means, don't hesitate to not answer. So Susan talked about the importance of the family and the support system. And I'm sure as a 14-year-old, sometimes it's difficult enough for a 14-year-old to have, good relationships with their parents or perhaps rebelling and just being normal teenagers. What's the journey been like with your parents and sort of where are you at now with them? And again, if that's not something you want to share,
Yeah, no, that's cool. My relationship with my parents growing up was fine. I mean, like any teenager, it's a bit rough. We're all hormonal and moody and, we fought a lot. But now today, I'd say my relationship with my parents is like the best it's ever been. I think through that time was really difficult. I was actually talking about this today with a friend of mine because we were talking about the webinar and some of the things I was going to share. And I remembered my dad, for example, I sort of really leaned into like sobriety and getting better when at the time when I was introduced to Susan, and I kind of took advantage of that, which was great. But I remember almost like coming home and being like, Dad, like, look, my drug tests are clean and look, I've been sober for like however many months. And he was kind of just like, or I don't know, he would like offer me alcohol during dinners and parties. And I was just being like, are you serious? Like you sort of like introduced me to this world and you wanted me to get better. Like, why are you sort of like, going against that? And like, I don't know. He was kind of just like, why are you I didn't ask you to be sober. I only sent you because I wanted you to like learn about the dangers of using. I was like, hey, but like you could at least be proud of me. Like it was always like a damned if you do, damned if you don't, which was really frustrating. But him and I went through therapy and he now knows not to do that. So, and my mom was always super supportive, but definitely I think at the time, yeah, I was very, very, very blessed to have supportive, for the most part, parents. And I know that not everyone has that. I think it's important to find some sort of role model or support systems around you and people older than you to sort of guide you through it. So I think, yeah, I was lucky.
I can only imagine it's very, very difficult for parents, as
Yeah,
difficult
I
for
couldn't
you as a
imagine
young
either.
person
Mhm.
going through a journey. I'm sure it's very difficult for parents
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
I'm
for
going to go
sure.
back. I'm going to go back to Brittany and see if she has any questions for Susan.
Sure. I do have some questions for Susan. Absolutely. These ones came to our email as well over the last couple weeks, and I will start with so when families first realize that a young person may be struggling with substance use, what are some of the most common reactions that you see from parents or caregivers?
Ooh, shock and awe. There tends to be so sometimes it is a crisis. So they are dealing with their own trauma response of discovering that there might be a drug dealer, there might be debts, there might be a car crash, there might be something quite extreme. So they're dealing with the awareness that their young person's substance involved and also a crisis. So it's a lot. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot for parents to take in and to almost like catch up with. They've been dropped into a series that's been going on for a bit, but they weren't aware necessarily. So maybe they had some blinders on. They have to kind of they're dumped right into reality pretty fast and furiously. If it's not a crisis, if it's kind of something that's been brewing for a while, spiraling behavior, they share that they're feeling guilt and responsibility, perhaps more than, often a lot more than they need to be carrying. So they can feel that somehow it's something they've done or haven't done, or so kind of personalizing it. So again, that's where support can be very helpful to deal with the feelings that are coming up for them, which are as important as what's happening with their loved one. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
if we have time, I have one question that I think builds on that a little
Yeah.
bit. And it's that families often struggle with the tension between wanting to fix the situation and also recognizing that recovery ultimately belongs to the young person. So, how can families navigate that balance in a healthy way?
That's it is a great question. Yeah, well, there's plenty for families to do on their own path of recovery. So trying to take the focus off of the other person's path and know that you both have a journey of recovery that's parallel and yet it will interact. So your young person has what they're supposed to be doing, and you have what's been recommended for you. And so, if people can kind of stay in their own lane a bit, it takes off that tendency to want to fix. The other simple things people can do is don't give advice unless asked for it. Um, Ask curious questions, ask open-ended questions so that you're not delegating or kind of interrogating or lecturing or educating. That's not those kinds of approaches aren't really welcomed because the youth will be getting their feedback. So in Lindsay's case, for example, she decided to be completely off of abstinent for a period of time. If that's your young person, don't be freaked out about it. Doesn't mean it's forever. It's it's her owning something in actually the healthiest regard. So but parents will worry about like, well, but can't they have a beer at the barbecue? Can't they have a drink at, we're celebrating somebody's whatever. So they really do need someone to talk to deal with their own responses to their young person's program of recovery, what they're doing, not to take it on too much, that it's just for today, and it doesn't mean that they're going to be sober and struggling with sobriety for the rest of their life necessarily. Yeah.
So I suspect it's very important to make good choices about who you're surrounding yourself when you are on this journey towards recovery. So, Lindsay, I'm wondering, did you have to make any tough choices along the way where you maybe had to end friendships because you didn't feel particular friends were helpful along your journey and heading you in the right direction? Is that something that comes into play?
Yeah, 100%. I remember specifically when I first started getting sober and seeing Susan. This was really early on, but I remember one of my best friends at the time um messaged me for like a dealer's number, and I was like,
Oh,
no, like cutting
Mhm.
out. And I've always sort of been like that. I've always been a little bit cutthroat, but I've had definitely had friends who, if they didn't support me, I was very quick to cut them off. And I think that was
Mhm.
questionably, I mean, now still probably a questionable habit, but I think at that time very helpful in my journey to getting better. So yeah, I think it's important to constantly keep yourself surrounded by people who will listen to you and support you through your journey. Yeah.
I
and
bet
that's where
that took a
some of
lot of
the
strength. I bet
Yeah,
to
for
end
sure.
some of those friendships. That's not easy to do
No,
because they might be
no,
good
no.
friends, but they're just making bad choices about what they are choosing to engage with you on. Sorry, Susan,
Yeah,
go
for
ahead.
sure.
Yeah, and that's where the positive peer support groups can be super helpful, because people
Mhm.
will be sharing how they deleted certain numbers from their phone, or how to
Yeah.
respond to that friend who's
Mhm.
asking for a connect. And the positive peer support, they've all been going through it for a longer period of time, so they can be kind of your really healthy friend network. Adults don't always understand this, getting
Hmm.
texted or blocking, all that kind of business. So it's really good to have age appropriate feedback from, like, how'd you handle it when your dealer texted you, or so that's the benefit that
Mhm.
Lindsay had with engaging, or her willingness to engage in all of these supports.
A quick question
Yeah.
for both of you before I just want to pull up some data in a moment, but a quick question. The concept of recovery, or the definition of recovery, does that mean the same thing for everybody? And I wanted to ask both of you, what does recovery mean to you, Lindsay?
I think it's definitely different for everybody. Um, for me, oh my gosh, I think finding what works best for you and knowing just when to stop doing what you're doing that is causing you or others harm. I think it's really important to pinpoint and feel those feelings and know exactly what you need to do. Like what Susan was saying before, it's like everyone's sort of journey looks different. It doesn't mean you have to be sober forever, or it doesn't mean it's you can there's harm reduction approaches as well. I think also, like I said, you
Mm,
can be addicted to anything. Doesn't mean whether it's food, doesn't mean you can't stop eating, or relationships doesn't mean you have to be abstinent forever, not talk to anybody. I think choosing healthy ways to sort of deal with your feelings without abusing anything is maybe my definition of recovery. But
mm.
I think it looks different for everybody, and it might look different to one person differently over time. You just got to figure out what works for you.
And that might
Yeah,
change at different times in your life and
exactly.
in your age.
Yeah.
Susan, recovery?
Yeah, I think what Lindsay said is very wise. And for myself, I like to, because I have my own lived experience. I'm 27 years free from alcohol and drugs, and eating disorder is somewhere in there as well, not as long. And so for me, it's like establishing a life that I don't want to escape from through any of these means, online, food, fantasy, whatever, even in healthy ways, spending or overdoing anything. So it's about having a bit of a framework of accountability for myself too.
Mm.
That so I have a therapist, I have a clinical supervisor, I have mentors, people that I go to and say like, I'm going to bounce this off you. How's this sound? It's just like every normal person I think has that as well. But when we've had exposure to a recovery program, we know the things that we need to do. And so if we slip from those, we know what we need to go back to. When I first started this work, I used to think, how am I supposed to talk to a young person, 14, 13, 15, whatever, and expect they're going to be sober for the rest of their life or abstinent for the rest of their life? Well, that was missing the point. The point was they're going to know where to go. They're going to know that there is a solution. They're going to
Mhm.
know, even if they're not ready for it yet, I always say my door's open, come back if things, so, hence I'm still connected to a lot of people that I've worked with. And there's a recovery community that you can dip into, dip out of. It's always, for some people that might be religion, for others it might be a community engagement. So
Mhm.
having something that you can be accountable for and to, so that you're not always listening to your own thoughts, which can
Right.
frequently be not telling us the truth or what's best for us.
So have support networks around you that you can
Yeah,
lean
have
into and
support.
rely on when needed at
Yeah.
different times in life. I'm just going to bring a
Absolutely.
little bit of data into the conversation, Brittany. Maybe if we can bring up a couple of slides just very quickly. Uh, Addictions is data that we do track with Canadians, and we have just a couple of slides here. Our data says we collect data quarterly, so it's current data, and it's self-reported from Canadians who don't know that they are signing up to do a survey on mental health. So younger Canadians under 34, particularly men, report highest risks of substance use dependence. Alcohol and cannabis, men 25 to 34 years reported the highest risk of dependence compared to other age groups. We do have a problem with opioids in our country. In the past 12 months, 14% of Canadians indicate they've used opioids, and 1 in 4 men between 25 and 34 reported taking opioids in the past 12 months. So this is, of course, a big concern. Go to the next slide, please, Brittany. Online gambling is also a very serious addictive behavior that has come into light due to changes in advertising regulations recently in the last couple of years. So this is an area to watch. There's a lot of information on our website about this. We've done reporting on this. 7 in 10 adult Canadians reported participating in some form of gambling. Again, young adults, men, those who participate in online gambling reported higher prevalence of problematic gambling. And you'll see in the middle there, young adults are 12 times more at risk for this, men 3 times more, low income 2 times more, and equity deserving groups 1.5 times more at risk. So this is a serious problem that some of our audience members may want to look into and dig into content on our website. And the last slide on this, Brittany, is just mental health indicators and addiction. Canadians experience more severe symptoms of anxiety and depression, are at a higher risk for dependency on alcohol and cannabis, as well as higher prevalence of problematic gambling. I won't go into any more detail on that. I'd like to flip instead to some resources. Susan, I know you provided us with, of course, your book and another flash of the cover, What's Wrong with My Teen? Finding Answers to Teenage Addiction and Family Crisis. If you're interested in hearing more of Susan's advice, you can certainly get it there in her book. And then I believe we have 2 slides of resources. Susan, I don't know if you wanted to address any of these. There's a lot of different resources across Canada, and there's always some help somewhere, but I know we also do have wait lines to get in to see people. Did you want to comment on resources, Susan?
Yeah, so there's also some great navigation tools across Canada. So finding someone to help a family navigate the system because it changes. There's different focuses. For example, 988, I think that service is only a couple of years old. So finding up-to-date information can be a little bit of a challenge. So I liked Lindsay's suggestion of asking if there's someone in your community that you know a family's gone through something like this. Again, you would meet those folks if you were willing to go to, say, a smart recovery group or an Al-Anon family group. You'd be meeting other families to understand and hear what resources have worked for them. The word of mouth is really important. Even in this digital era of Akela and I were talking about how many apps there are for mental health, but I frankly find it overwhelming. So I can't imagine what someone who's not in the profession, how they find it. So I too look at judge places based on what my colleagues have told me, what my clients have told me, and what experience people have had with them, because organizations can shift and too. The thing I like about sort of the community resources like 12-Step and Smart Recovery, I'm sure jack.org, and there is no wait time. You don't have to take every message that they give. There's a lot of kind of stigma and barriers around, oh, well, that organization might sound like it's religious. Well, you could dip your toe in. Nobody's suggesting that you swallow it 100%. While you're waiting for another service, take what you like out of other things and leave the rest, because there's nothing worse than thinking of someone sitting in isolation in their place or using their substance and not getting some support while they're ready. And I believe that there always are services available.
Thank you, Susan. We are out of time. I have one more question for Lindsay, but just before asking her that closing question, because you mentioned apps, Susan, I just wanted to mention that there, yes, are over 1 million mental health apps around the globe. I think it's really important that if anyone is using an app, that they make sure they're using an accredited app or an app that's recommended by a recognized organization, because sometimes apps can do more harm than good if they're not evidence-based. So I think that's very important. Lindsay, last question. Advice for anybody listening who may have someone in their life that they think is perhaps using and it's become a problem. What advice would you have?
I would say to approach it with open arms and love. I think dealing with people in addiction is super infuriating and triggering, and I understand too, like with what I've dealt with my older sister, I've had negative interactions and feelings towards her my entire life, but that doesn't make anyone want to listen to you. I think if you keep your arms open and keep supporting them, obviously, like there's boundaries. If this person is, harmful, I think you have every right to put up boundaries. But I think if you truly love someone, just you want them to get better, I think you need to approach it from a softer place and be there when they need, like Susan was saying too, you can't like force someone into doing something that you want them to do. I think you can just be supportive and just have, keep reminding them that, help is accessible. And if they keep the door open and when they're ready, they'll come and get the support they need. So just stay hopeful and stay loving.
Great advice. Thank you, Lindsay. And to the person who's listening who may be struggling in silence and not knowing where to turn, I'll quote you, Lindsay, to say there always can be better days ahead. You mentioned that earlier. So have hope and seek treatment. Seek the right kind of help and support to get you through your journey. So thank you to both of you, and congratulations to both of you on your journeys. It's just tremendous to have you here sharing your journeys very authentically and personally. And I well know that we're going to have great feedback on this webinar. So on behalf of MHRC, thank you so much for sharing your stories today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you
Thank you
for
so much for having me.
hosting
I really
it.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.